live sound is, for me, that's where I got started right out of college. I went to college thinking I'm going to record music, right? I'm going to record music in a studio. And over time, I learned that I much more enjoyed troubleshooting than I enjoyed mixing and production, actually. It's a special kind of crazy you've got to be in live sound. But I was just talking to Gabe. Being in the studio environment throughout my college career, I learned a lot about patching things, and I learned about using a system that's already in place. But I felt that I didn't learn as much about how the system was actually connected, because we didn't have a drawing to show that. All we had was the system, and I knew that we had the patch bay, and what happened behind the console and behind all of the outboard gear, I wasn't really very comfortable with until I did an internship in live sound. And that's when I really discovered, Gabe, like how, you set up a different system every single time. And so you very quickly learn how the system is to be set up. And then sometimes yourself or stagehands or other people on your team set it up incorrectly, and you have to troubleshoot. And so then you're retracing, and that those repetitions of setting up and troubleshooting and fixing, those things really helped me, not only in live sound, but I was able to bring that back with me to do studio stuff as well. You've got some experience there as well, right, Gabe?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I started my career more in the post side, and working on records than live. But where I learned the most about live sound was my studio was actually located in a rehearsal facility in Boston, in Somerville, and it was a well utilized space. We had like 4,000 musicians that came in every year, and would use that for hourly bookings to do rehearsals and things like that. But one of the big features we had in our space was this. I had like a 50-foot by 40-foot soundstage that was my live room, basically, for when I would do tracking. But when I wasn't using it for tracking, it was a rehearsal space. And so we would oftentimes get bands who were on tour, roll in, and they'd have to set up, their rig, and they would want to rehearse before a tour. Sometimes we would do tour prep. So it was a lot of like setting stuff up and tearing it down and setting it up and tearing it down. And that was like a rehearsal thing that they would rehearse as much as the band would have to rehearse. So the band would be like in one room working out the musical stuff. And then the next room over, we were rehearsing, setting up and tearing down the rigging and the sound systems and stuff. So, I got to see a lot of different experts do it, and learned a healthy respect for live sound systems and patching and signal flow, and also the importance of being flexible. Like if someone asks for something, how to facilitate doing it, to understanding the capacity and the limitations of your systems, and sometimes figuring out ways around it, but most of the time working within them was kind of the first sort of real life war test that you had to survive in order to get good at live sound.
Yeah, it's good practice for tracking days, because often time is much more limited than compared to if you're in your own studio at your house or something, and you can mix and you can spend maybe it's too much time doing something. It's only a certain amount of time, and like you said before the show started, those things can be show stoppers, and that's not good, right?
Right.
In addition, though, to the troubleshooting and signal flow that you gain from working in live sound, you also kind of need to take a different perspective on mixing, right? It's not always, in studio, you're creating from the ground up what the listener will hear.
Right.
Not only that, but or you can sometimes assume where the listener's going to be. Not always. Sometimes people throw a Bluetooth speaker in the corner and they can be anywhere. But when you're mixing in a studio setup, you're often mixing assuming that the person is between the two speakers. Whereas in live sound, there's maybe a few dozen people between the speakers, but then there's 100 other people in random places.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you've got feedback to worry about. That isn't an issue in a studio recording mix environment. And then in addition to that, what was that last thing we were talking about? It was, getting back to what I was saying, you're not building it from the ground up, right? You're reinforcing things. You brought up a good point that nowadays that's starting to become less true, because a lot of the musicians on stage are using in-ears. and a lot of them are using amp simulators rather than real amps. And so stages are getting quieter, which is great. Reduces the problem of feedback a little bit.
Yeah.
And it also reduces the amount of stage volume that the audience hears.
Right.
But I think that when I was first beginning to mix live sound, those opportunities happened in small clubs or generally small rooms where the drum set was really loud already with all microphones turned off.
Right.
And I think a huge mistake a lot of people make is trying to, all right, can I hear the kick drum? Great. Let's get a nice, healthy level of that. Let's send it at unity to the mains, and then let's do the same thing with everything. Similar to how you might start to set up a studio recording.
Right.
When in reality, I soon learned that mics are not necessary on all things. You know, banjos, sometimes guitar cabinets, especially if the guitarist insists on loud amps to get their tone, you know?
Yeah.
And so then it's about kind of filling in the pieces, which is why I think a lot of members have actually said this in past events. My mix sounds, my stream mix doesn't sound like I want it to. In the event space itself, the mix sounds great, but when I send that mix to a YouTube stream, it doesn't sound right. And that makes sense because in the event space, you're hearing things straight from the stage and the reinforced sound.
Right. Yes. Yes, it's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, you came back to studio mixing yourself. That's where most of your experience over the length of your career has been, and that's where all of your experience now is, right? All of your work now is in studio, right?
Yeah, every once in a while I'm handling live stuff, but it's not, it's something I tried to. I had a few experiences that just, were really good experiences and taught me a lot. But one of the biggest lessons I learned from them was like, there are people who are really good at this and want to do just live, and they are going to be experts at that. And at some point, when you're trying to make a career out of it, you really kind of have to pick an area to specialize in. And it was clear to me, and that studio work was really where I was going to be. The studio was where I was going to do most of my professional work. But it wasn't without having kicked the live sound tires quite a bit. And so I've spent enough time doing live sound to where I have a healthy respect for it and can do it if I have to, but I'm trying not to professionally do it as much. Also, I have kids, and I have a full-time teaching job, so it's not like I can take nights off to do late nights anymore and go on tour.
That's kind of what made me get out of live sound. Was I noticed that the people in live sound who really thrived were the people who on a Saturday night they'd rather be nowhere else than right there, And I wanted to be somewhere else. I wanted to have Friday and Saturday nights, but that's when events happen. So
there were Saturday nights where I was happy to be behind a mix console, like running the but I mean it's a job, and it comes with a lot of sacrifice, and I have a lot of respect for the men and women who do that work. But when it comes to the things that are important about setting up systems, you have to really learn a lot about the band you're working with and what they're bringing, like you mentioned, the stage volume and what their capabilities are, and then you have to really figure out how to navigate that inside of spaces which are constantly changing. So you rarely get to do shoot the same problems every day. It's always a new set, especially if you're touring and moving around. So
however, there is a similar principle that exists, like you get used to your system in a studio environment, and whether it's perfect or not, if you can get used to that, it'll help you. Now, it's best to try to use acoustic treatment and things to make it objectively as accurate as possible. But there is something to be said about just learning your system. And in live sound, you'd think that would be impossible. But there's a common technique, and I learned it originally from Dave Ratt, where before you start anything, you play music through the system, or you tune the system in a way that how do I say this, Gabe? It's kind of like you play music through system A and it sounds perfect, and then you play music through system B, and there's a little bit of a bump in the low mids or something. But so if you can remove that bump on the output of the mixer using like a system-wide EQ, then maybe you return yourself to somewhat of a standard frequency response, let's say, that you can rely on. So especially for a touring engineer, what you'll see is that though they're moving from place to place, they do their best before the show starts to make this system sound similar to what the system sounded like last night and the night before and the night before, right? And that's sort of what we're going for in a studio environment. We want to rely on what we're hearing, right? We want to make sure that what goes into it is what we're hearing.
Yeah, you have to. There's something called room tuning that you want to calibrate. Your listening position for sure, whether you're working in the studio, and certainly if you're working live. So some of it is understanding acoustics, and some of it is really thinking about what am I hearing, how do things change, and but there's even more. Like we could talk about it more, and I don't know if there will be questions about this, but it can for future topics for sure. That even during the course of a night, as especially if you're doing like a large space, like when we used to do amphitheaters, you do your sound check to an empty room, and that sounds one way, and then you fill it up with a bunch of walking fluid filled meat sacks, and you get a bunch of people in there, and the acoustics of the space completely change, and so you have to be able to adapt on the fly. So you're constantly like, what do I hear, how do I check what I hear, and how do I manipulate the tools to get things back on track if they veer. And then you also have ear fatigue. You have these days things being so loud that you have to count on there being high frequency creep throughout the night because people's ears just fatigue at those loud levels, which I wish weren't the case, but c'est la vie.
Yeah. So we can go ahead and transition now to taking questions, but I want to let you know, if you are a live sound person, we don't have a specific live sound course yet, but I think Mixing Essentials, almost all of the concepts you discuss in there are also relevant to a live sound mixing skill set. Don't you agree?
Yeah, for the most part. I think, when it comes to system design, that's different. If it's learning about how to design amplifier circuits or looking at routing solutions and that sort of thing, it's not really there. But yeah, the core of like the tools, the EQ, compression, reverb, delay, those sorts of things used for mixing are definitely going to be covered in that, as well as some philosophical stuff.